Okay, so what the Constitution did was it created a new U.S. government comprised of three branches, one of which was the legislative branch, whose function was to make laws. Now what you see here is a Capitol building, and the Capitol building housed Congress. That's where the U.S. Capitol is located. And what they created was what's called a bicameral legislature. Bicameral means two chambers, bi meaning two, cameral meaning chambers. A two-chamber legislature, there were two houses, they're also called, of Congress. One of them was called the Senate, and the other one was called the House of Representatives. Now what that was a way of satisfying the needs and desires of the different states and the different people within the different states. The Senate satisfied the needs of the states themselves who wanted to be represented in the federal government, where each state got an equal voice. So you have two senators representing each state, no matter how large or small the state is. So Pennsylvania and Virginia get two senators, and New Jersey and Delaware, smaller states, also get two senators. And each of those senators gets a vote on any potential laws. The other part of Congress, the other chamber in the bicameral legislature, is the House of Representatives. And the way that works is representation is proportional within each state based on population. So for instance, in very smallly populated states, even today, you have Arkansas, Delaware, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont, and Wyoming. They only have one representative in the House of Representatives. Rhode Island has two representatives in the House of Representatives. California has 53 representatives representing California for new laws in the House of Representatives. So how does this work? What's the purpose of the bicameral legislature? Well, it's so that both houses have to pass what would become a potential law. It starts out as a bill. You write up a bill and you propose it to your chamber of Congress. Usually the House of Representatives sees a potential law first. The bill goes through the House of Representatives. If it is passed in the House of Representatives, that means that the people's wishes were met, because the House of Representatives is to represent the people's wishes. Then the bill goes on to the Senate. The Senate is supposed to represent each state's wishes, so each state's interest can be represented by the senators. If the bill passes through the Senate, then the bill will move on to the next level. Now remember, there were three branches of government. Congress is only one of those branches. Well, the president is in the executive branch, and then he gets to either veto the bill, which means he rejects it, or he signs the bill into a law. More on the system of checks and balances later. But notice how I'm taking time to draw the arrows in the Senate. That's because the Senate took a little more time. They were supposed to be a little more deliberate. The Senate was considered to be the upper house, and the House of Representatives was a lower house of the two houses of Congress. Each senator was in power for 6 years, whereas each representative in the House was in power for 2 years. So in the bicameral legislature, the people's wishes were represented by the House of Representatives, and the state's wishes were represented by the Senate. Okay, so let's take a look at the executive branch. Now, the executive branch executes or carries out the laws that Congress makes. Now, you remember, when a bill was passed through both houses of Congress and made it past the Senate, it then had to go to the president, who would veto or sign the bill into law. Well, the president is the man who inhabits that house you just saw, the White House. That's where the office of the president is held. But the executive branch doesn't just include the office of the president or the president of the United States. The responsibilities of carrying out all the laws that have to be executed by the executive branch and all the other responsibilities of the executive branch goes not only to the president, but also to the departments that have been established where the president can have all of these other responsibilities carried out. The Department of State, the Department of Justice are two examples of these. So what do you think of when you think of the White House and the President of the United States? You think of the Oval Office, where the President does his work. But it's not just him, and it's not just the departments. When it comes to decision making, the President has the help of the heads of those departments, the Department of State, the Department of Justice, etc. And that group of people that help the President make his decisions are called the Cabinet. The President's Cabinet members are basically like a team of leaders that help make decisions with the President. So what are the President's roles? Well, basically, Commander-in-Chief of the military. Also, making treaties with the consent of the Senate with other nations. Third, nominating ambassadors and Supreme Court judges, which a president only really has an opportunity to do when a judge has retired or passed away. And finally, the president can pardon federal criminals, which tends to happen at the end of a president's term in office. Speaking of time in office, how does a president leave office? Well, the president gets a 4-year term, and then if reelected, gets a second 4-year term. But a president can also be impeached, where Congress, particularly the House, can accuse the president of a crime against the Constitution. The Senate then tries the president. If he's found guilty, he's booted out of office. Okay, so that was the legislative branch and the executive branch. What about the judicial branch? Well, their role of the 3 branches of government is to interpret the laws that Congress makes. Primarily, you have the Supreme Court. Now, you have to remember, the Founding Fathers intended the Constitution to be the supreme law of the land, and so the court's role was to protect the U.S. Constitution. Now, they had other roles as well. They were also in charge with resolving disputes over national laws with the federal government or states, plus trying cases involving federal crimes. Now, there are 9 Supreme Court justices on the Supreme Court. The reason you have 9 justices is because it's an odd number. Makes sense, right? You have to break the tie. If you have a case that goes to the Supreme Court and it's guilt or innocence, you're going to need an odd number to decide in terms of all the justices making their decision on that particular court case. An odd number creates a tie-breaking situation. And the Supreme Court's decisions are final. They override all other courts lower than them. So how does that system work? Well, you have district courts, and district courts are set up throughout the country over large geographical districts, each one covering several states. So cases can go to the district court, and if the plaintiff or the defendant doesn't like the result of the court case, they can appeal to have it taken to a higher court. And that next level will be called the appellate courts or the appeals courts. What they would do is they would hear the case again. If they've accepted the court case, they would hear it again, retrying the cases from the district courts. And then again, of course, if that decision isn't one that either the plaintiff or defendant likes, then it can be sent to the next highest level, which is the final level, and that would be the Supreme Court. And once that happens, if the Supreme Court takes the case, the decision, as we said earlier, is final. But see, they don't take every case in the Supreme Court. There might be 1,000 appeals sent to the Supreme Court, but the justices will only agree to take about 100 per year because it has to be something that violates federal law or the Constitution. So there you have the 3 branches of government, legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government. And what the Founding Fathers were trying to do there was set up a system of checks and balances, where each branch would check and balance the other. Like the legislative branch, send bills to the president to be signed into law, but the president can veto those bills. However, Congress can then override the presidential veto with a 2/3 vote. Another check and balance is the president nominates Supreme Court justices. However, Supreme Court justices can reject presidential treaties if deemed unconstitutional. An additional check is Congress can approve Supreme Court justice appointments that the president makes, but the judicial branch can reject laws that Congress makes if those laws are deemed unconstitutional. So there you have a system of government set up by the Founding Fathers where the federal government was divided into 3 separate branches where each branch could check over the others and not one branch could become more powerful than the other 2.